Hey guys, tonight we begin with the sun-drenched marble colonnades and dust-choked forums of ancient Rome, a civilization known for its mighty legions, aqueducts, and emperors with delusions of divinity. But beneath the triumphal arches and golden laurel crowns lies a far more difficult truth. Because while Rome gave us roads, laws, and languages, it also gave the average citizen a daily struggle that yes, you, would barely survive today. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Welcome to ancient Rome, where your day begins not with a gentle alarm or warm shower, but with the sharp clatter of carts on stone streets and the smell of yesterday's refuse baking in the sun. Your home, a cramped insula, an apartment block several stories high, built hastily from timber and cheap stone, where fire was not a risk but a weekly guest. There's no insulation, no plumbing, and if you live on the upper floors, no water either. You haul it up by hand and hope the rickety stairs don't collapse beneath your sandals. You wake before dawn, not because you're disciplined, but because the city never sleeps. Rome is alive, buzzing with vendors, donkeys, thieves, and the occasional fire brigade yelling through alleys. Your mattress is straw, your pillow is a folded cloak, and your neighbors are separated by walls so thin you know their sleep patterns better than your own. Privacy? That's a luxury reserved for senators. There's no running water, no sink. You wash your face with a bit of cold water from a shared bucket, if you're lucky, or simply rub off the night's sweat with a piece of cloth and a muttered prayer to the Lares, your household gods. Toilets, public, and not in the modern sense. A stone bench with holes over a communal trough. No dividers, no dignity. You do your business shoulder to shoulder with strangers, armed only with a sponge on a stick, rinsed in brine and reused by everyone. Hungry? Let's talk breakfast. It's called the estroscientaculum, and it's modest. Bread, maybe dipped in wine, with a few olives if you're fortunate. No eggs, no bacon, no Instagram-worthy spreads. Just survival. And if the bread is too stale, you soak it in watered wine and chew until it softens. You eat standing. There's no kitchen in your insula. Cooking indoors is a fire hazard, which means your meals come from street vendors, communal ovens, or not at all. Then it's off to work. Unless you're one of the elite few who can lounge in a villa discussing stoicism, you labor. Maybe you're a dock worker at the Tiber, hauling amphorae from grain ships, or a craftsman toiling in a poorly lit workshop, or a woman selling flowers near the Forum, constantly dodging soldiers and pickpockets. Rome is busy, hot, loud, and utterly unforgiving. And your reward for a day of sweat, a few coins, maybe enough for a crust of bread and a pint of posca, sour wine mixed with water and herbs. Not refreshing, just necessary. And if you're a slave, none of that matters. You don't own your time. You don't own your body. You labor until you're told to stop, and even then, rest is conditional. You might be a scribe, a cook, a tutor, or a gladiator in training, or worse, condemned to the mines, where daylight is a rumor and survival a miracle. Sound tough? That's just the morning. There's still heat, hunger, and hierarchy to face before dusk. But don't worry, you've got gods, laws, and public spectacles to distract you. And if that fails, there's always the Colosseum, where someone else's death reminds you how alive you still are. Now let's talk hygiene, or more accurately, its theatrical approximation. Romans loved public baths, not for cleanliness, but for ritual, socialization, and occasionally business deals made in the nude. Bathing was a process. Start in the apoditerium to undress, move to the tepidarium for a warm soak, then the caldarium for steam, and finally the frigidarium to close your pores and maybe your soul. Scraped clean with a strigil, rubbed down with oil, and surrounded by the collective sweat of your fellow citizens. You were never truly clean, just less visibly grimy. But if you were poor, you might never make it to the baths. Entrance fees were low, but not zero. And time, not yours to waste. Your bath might consist of a splash from a bucket and a whisper of soap, if you managed to steal a sliver from a wealthier household. Toothbrush, chew stick, deodorant, pray for a breeze, perfume. If you're lucky, a dab of rancid oil left over from your master's kitchen. And then there's the smell. Rome stinks. Not poetically, literally. Open sewers called cloacae lined the streets. Chamber pots were emptied from windows. The Tiber River, lifeblood of the city, doubled as garbage dump, latrine, and water source. The stench clung to the fabric of the city like a second toga. Even the elite could not fully escape it. They just built higher walls and burned incense. Let's talk lunch, if you can call it that. Prandium was usually cold leftovers. Yesterday's bread, some fruit, maybe salted fish or lentils. Hot meals were rare unless you could afford Thermopolium Rome's ancient fast food joint. These smoky street-side shops served hot stews and wine, along with a solid risk of food poisoning. Hygiene standards were imaginative, and refrigeration did not exist. If it looked edible, it probably wasn't. But you ate it anyway, because the next meal wasn't guaranteed. By mid-afternoon, the heat is unbearable. The sun, unfiltered by any concept of sunscreen, turns stone streets into ovens. You duck into any shaded alley or arcade you can find, hoping to escape the glare. Maybe you grab a nap if your job allows it. But more likely, you're sweating through your tunic, the coarse wool clinging to every regret. And if you're a woman, your day isn't easier. Elite Roman women may have lived behind gilded doors, but they were essentially ornamental. Their lives were dictated by marriage contracts, household politics, and the constant threat of childbirth. Lower-class women worked hard as vendors, servants, weavers, wet nurses. They endured the same smells, the same heat, the same oppression, with none of the rights. Dinner, or cena, was the main event. For the wealthy, it was an affair of reclining couches, multiple courses, and philosophical debate. But you're huddled over a wooden bowl, eating whatever your day's labor bought you. Porridge, beans, maybe a bit of meat if the gods smiled. No forks, no napkins, just fingers and hope. And still, your day isn't done, because Rome, for all its brilliance, was also paranoid. Fires, thefts, riots, common enough to warrant night patrols. You sleep lightly, listening for footsteps that mean trouble, or worse, silence that means it already arrived. And as the city finally quiets, as the moon rises over crumbling rooftops and temple columns, you realize something. You survived. Just barely. One day down, maybe another tomorrow, but would you last a week? Welcome to ancient Rome. The empire may be glorious, but the daily grind? Absolutely brutal. Let's talk about the law. Rome prided itself on legal order, but don't confuse that with justice. The 12 Tables, the earliest Roman legal code, laid out clear rules. But fair application? That depended on your status. A patrician could expect leniency, connections, even immunity. A plebeian, fines, lashes, or death. A slave, not even considered a person under the law. Trial by jury? Sort of. Trials were public spectacles, held in the forum, often decided as much by rhetoric and bribes as evidence. If you were accused, you could hire an orator to argue your case. If you couldn't afford one, good luck. Some cases went straight to a magistrate, who could sentence you on the spot. And the punishments? Harsh. Flogging, branding, exile, crucifixion, if they really wanted to make a point. And if the state thought you were a threat, you disappeared. Quietly, permanently. The prisons weren't meant for long-term punishment. They were holding cells before execution or exile. Dirty, overcrowded, and barely lit. The famous Mamertine prison? A hole in the ground beneath a temple. If you were tossed in, you didn't come out. Now let's revisit slavery, because Roman society ran on it. Every third person in the city might be a slave, captured in war, born into bondage, or sold by desperate parents. Slaves built the roads, cleaned the latrines, raised the children of senators. Some were highly educated, Greek tutors, scribes, even doctors. But freedom? Rare. Some bought their way out. Some were granted manumission, but most remained tools, property. If your master was cruel, your life was misery, and the law protected him, not you. And if a slave killed their master, even accidentally, all the household slaves could be executed, hundreds sometimes, just to prove a point. Politics in Rome, less House of Commons, more gladiator pit with nicer clothes. Senators debated in the Curia, but real power often came from backroom deals and patronage networks. You supported a powerful man, and in return, he protected you. Votes were bought, offices were sold, and emperors, gods in human form, or so they liked to think. The emperor's word was law. Augustus kept the illusion of republic alive, but by Nero's time, it was clear. Rome was an empire, not a democracy. Say the wrong thing, associate with the wrong person, get too popular, and you risked execution. Or worse, forced suicide with your property confiscated. Now imagine you're a soldier. Rome's legions were the most feared force on earth. But enlistment wasn't glory. It was a contract with pain. 25 years of service, often spent far from home, guarding freezing frontiers or roasting in desert outposts. You marched thousands of miles, carried your armor, cooked your food, built your camps, fought brutal battles. And when you finally retired, if you lived, you got a plot of land. Maybe, unless some senator decided otherwise. If injured, too bad. No pensions, no medical corps, just your comrades, battlefield hacks, and grit. Training was constant, discipline, brutal. A whip was standard issue for officers. Mutiny meant death. Cowardice meant decimation, killing every 10th man in your unit. It wasn't honor, it was survival. Then there were gladiators, not soldiers, slaves trained to die for entertainment. You lived in barracks, trained in blood-soaked sand, and performed in front of jeering crowds. If you fought well, you might win fame. If you won often, maybe freedom. But most died anonymously, torn apart by beasts, gutted by swords, or killed on command by the editor, the man with his thumb turned down. Public spectacles were Rome's pressure valve. Bread and circuses, the poet said. Feed the masses, distract them. The Colosseum could hold 50,000 people. Entry was free, and what you watched was carnage. Gladiator duels, animal hunts, executions, sometimes theatrical reenactments of myths where the victim actually died. Criminals burned alive, Christians fed to lions. Rome didn't hide its brutality. It choreographed it. Temples were everywhere, but faith in Rome was transactional. You prayed to gods for favors, offered sacrifices for protection. Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and dozens of others. Household spirits, emperor cults, foreign imports like Isis and Mithras. Religion was less about belief, more about doing the rituals right. Wrong prayer, angry gods. Missed festival, bad harvest. And then there were the omens. Birds flying in the wrong direction could cancel a Senate meeting. A bad dream might halt a battle. The augurs, state-sanctioned diviners, interpreted everything, even poop. That's not a joke. Divine displeasure could be read in anything, and decisions were made accordingly. Medical care, primitive. Rich Romans might have access to trained physicians, often Greek slaves, but most people relied on folk remedies. Honey for wounds, vinegar for infections, magic amulets for everything else. Surgery, last resort. Without anesthesia, it was agony. Amputations done with saws, eye surgeries with bronze needles, toothaches, extraction. No Novocaine, just bite down, and don't get sick in summer. The heat, the crowds, the lack of sanitation, all perfect for epidemics. The Antonine Plague killed millions. So did the plague of Cyprian. Doctors couldn't explain it. Priests blamed the gods. Bodies piled up in the streets. If you died, burial was crucial. The poor were dumped in mass graves outside the city walls. The rich had elaborate tombs. Everyone wanted a coin for Charon, the ferryman to the underworld. No coin, your soul wandered. Life expectancy, 35 if you were lucky. Infant mortality high. Childbirth deadly. War constant. Crime everywhere. Fires frequent. And still, people endured. Rome gave us roads, aqueducts, philosophy, and law. But it was built on backs, on blood, on blistered feet and broken bodies. You've had your tour of daily Rome, woken with the noise, walked the filthy streets, ducked the sewage, felt the hunger. But you've only just begun scratching the surface of what it meant to live under the eagle standard of the Roman Empire. Let's step outside the city, because not all Romans lived in Rome. In fact, the majority lived in rural areas or provincial towns scattered across the vast sweep of empire, from the misty isles of Britannia to the burning sands of Syria. Life in the countryside had its own flavor of hardship. You're a tenant farmer, a colonus. You rent your land from a wealthy landowner who may never visit, but whose taxes arrive like clockwork. Your crops, wheat, barley, grapes, maybe olives if you're lucky, but don't get too creative. Rome demands its grain, and grain it shall have. You till the land with wooden tools and iron discipline, waking before sunrise to feed animals, weed fields, and pray for rain. There is no tractor, no irrigation system beyond what you and your neighbors dig with your own blistered hands. Drought means starvation. Flood means debt. Disease in your livestock means ruin. If you're a freedman, you might run a small shop or a tavern in a provincial town. You're tolerated, barely, by the local elites. Your status is ambiguous. Not a slave, but not fully embraced either. Social mobility is possible in theory. In practice, rare, especially if your wealth provokes envy. One wrong move in your permits, your property, your family, all vulnerable to the whims of the local magistrate. Maybe you're a soldier stationed in the northern frontier, where the wind bites through your cloak and the barbarian woods whisper threats. Here, the empire is a thin line of stone walls, outposts, and disciplined men. You patrol the forests, build roads, and try to hold back the people Rome calls uncivilized. But they don't think of themselves that way, and they never stop watching. In Egypt, the breadbasket of the empire, farmers bend under the weight of grain quotas. The Nile floods nourish the land, but miscalculate the yield. The tax collector does not forgive. Bureaucracy here is ruthless and entrenched. A single missing document might cost you everything. And across all these provinces, Romanization. Statues of emperors rise in city centers. Latin spreads through trade and governance. Temples to Jupiter spring up beside native shrines. The empire doesn't always conquer with legions. Sometimes it conquers with culture, convenience, and the slow erosion of your traditions. But you don't have time to resist. You're working from dawn to dusk. The roads may be paved, but your sandals are thin. You're tired, always. Back in the city, let's not forget education. If you were lucky enough to receive one. Most children didn't go to school. They worked. But if your family had a few coins to spare, you might be sent to a literator, a basic schoolmaster who would teach you to read and write, likely using wax tablets and a stylus. You'd copy down lines of Virgil or Cicero over and over, while your teacher barked corrections and beat the inattentive. Girls? Generally not educated, unless they were wealthy, and even then, it was limited. Music, poetry, household management. Enough to attract a husband, not enough to outshine him. Boys of status might advance to rhetoric school, learning to argue, gesture, and persuade. Rome prized oratory. The Senate floor was a stage, a well-timed pause, a rising tone. These could shift the course of policy more than a legion ever could. But if you were born poor, literacy was a dream. You learned your trade with your hands. Letters were for ledgers and laws that ruled your life but rarely included your voice. Even Rome's architecture, the awe-inspiring aqueducts, roads, and temples, had a cost. Who laid the stones of the Via Appia? Slaves. Who carved the marble for the Pantheon? Laborers breaking their backs for a wage that barely fed them. Who lifted the scaffolding for the Colosseum's tiers? Men who'd never sit in them. The monuments endure, but the people who built them? Forgotten. And in the shadow of these buildings, crime thrived. Rome had no professional police. The vigils tried to keep order, but mostly dealt with fires. Real crime prevention fell to private guards, hired muscle, or shish. Your luck. Pickpockets worked the forums. Gangs roamed the Subura. And if you crossed someone powerful, justice was a distant hope. Assassination, blackmail, and coercion were political tools as much as threats. Let's not romanticize marriage, either. Weddings in Rome were more contract than celebration. A transfer of wealth, property, and alliances. Love, optional. Girls married young, often in their early teens, to older men who valued fertility more than companionship. Divorce was common and simple, just a declaration. But remarriage was expected, especially for women. Your worth was tied to childbirth, and childbirth was dangerous. No antiseptics, no pain relief, midwives with limited training. 1 in 5 women might die giving birth, and if the child survived, a new fear, exposure. Infants were not guaranteed life. If the father didn't accept the child, if it was sickly, deformed, or simply inconvenient, it could be left to die. Exposure was legal, common, and terrifying. Some children were rescued by slavers. Most were not. Yet amid all this, festivals flourished. Rome loved its holidays. Saturnalia, Lupercalia, the games of Venus and Mars. Days off work, public feasts, revelry and mischief. For a moment, the city sparkled. Slaves were allowed to dine like freemen. Gifts were exchanged, rules bent, but only for a moment. Because when the wine dried up and the torches dimmed, the hierarchy returned. Always. Let's return to religion, because to live in Rome was to live surrounded by gods. Gods in your home, gods in the street, gods above your bed and beneath your feet. You had Lares in penance to guard your household, statues tucked into little niches above your hearth. Every morning, you offered a prayer, maybe a pinch of flour or wine. To forget was to invite misfortune, an infection, a lost purse, a failed crop. The temples loomed over the forum, massive marble spaces filled with smoke, chants, and golden idols. But unlike modern religion, this wasn't about faith. It was about performance, precision. You didn't believe in Jupiter. You honored him the same way you honored your master, or your magistrate, or the emperor, because not doing so was dangerous. Even emperors became divine. Officially, their images were paraded, worshipped. Some embraced it. Caligula insisted he was a living god. Domitian demanded sacrifices in his name. It wasn't just ego, it was politics. To question the emperor's divinity was treason. And yet, foreign religions flourished. Quietly, cautiously. Judaism existed under scrutiny. Christianity began in shadows, in catacombs, in whispers. The gods of Egypt and Persia made inroads too. Rome didn't care what you believed until it made you disobedient. Then, it cared deeply. And when plague came, or famine, or defeat, people turned to new gods. New rituals, anything for hope. But hope was fragile in Rome, especially if you were sick, or old, or simply unlucky. If you grew too frail to work, there was no safety net. Charity existed, but sporadically. A kind neighbor, a generous patron, a food dole on certain days. But mostly, you begged, or starved, or died quietly in a corner while others stepped over your body. If you were injured, a broken limb, a deep cut, you hoped for a sympathetic healer. Cauterization was common. Herbal poultices, leeches, and always prayers. If you were insane, possessed, they said, cursed, you might be exorcised, or chained, or pushed to the margins where the gods and people looked away. Even fun carried risk. A chariot race in the Circus Maximus could turn deadly in seconds. 4 teams, reds, whites, blues, greens. Fans were rabid. Drivers wore little armor. Crashes, called naufragia, shipwrecks, were bloody, brutal, and beloved. The crowd cheered most when wheels shattered and bodies flew. Then there were theater shows, not just comedies or tragedies, but mimes, farces, obscene pantomimes. Actors were often viewed as low class, scandalous. But for a few hours, you laughed, or gasped, or forgot your hunger. The baths, social centers, sure, but also sites of gossip, scheming, and sometimes assault. You bathed beside your employer, your enemy, your creditor. There were no secrets in the steam. And the markets, bustling, chaotic, where everything from fish to slaves to spices was bought and bartered. Haggle wrong, you paid double. Look wrong, you got robbed. Say the wrong thing, you got stabbed. Let's not forget fire. The city was a tinderbox. Most buildings were wood, built too close together. Open flames used for cooking. Candles everywhere. A single spark could destroy an entire block. And when it did, the vigils tried their best. But their equipment was primitive. Buckets, hooks, a few water pumps. Often, the fire won. And if your home burned, you were homeless instantly. Renters had no protection. Insurance, a fantasy. The landlord might rebuild, or he might leave. Your family now slept in the street, or in a crowded lodging house even filthier than the last. And yet people kept coming to Rome, because it was the center of power, of possibility, of spectacle. You could watch an elephant walk through the forum, hear a senator debate Cicero's latest speech, see a general parade his plunder from Gaul, watch a condemned man reenact a myth by actually being eaten alive. And maybe, just maybe, you'd rise. Gain a patron, earn a coin, survive long enough to matter. But the odds were never in your favor. Even water, the miraculous aqueducts, didn't reach everyone. The elite had indoor plumbing. You waited at the public fountain, carried buckets up flights of stairs, or paid a water seller who might have just scooped it from a filthy basin. And food, Rome depended on imports, grain from Egypt, oil from Hispania, wine from Gaul. If the grain ships were late, prices soared. Riots broke out. The emperor intervened, if only to protect himself. Let's visit the port of Ostia. Ships dock daily, cargo unloaded by hundreds of slaves, wheat stored in vast granaries. The smell of salt, sweat, and spilled oil fills the air. Merchants yell in dozens of languages: Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Egyptian. Rome wasn't just Italian. It was a mosaic of peoples, free and enslaved, rich and poor, citizen and foreigner. This diversity built the empire, and sometimes broke it. Tensions simmered, uprisings happened. Spartacus was not the only rebel. Judea burned more than once. Germania bled Roman legions dry. Britannia seethed under governors. But most people didn't rebel. They endured, because rebellion was death. Endurance, however bitter, meant survival. You pay your taxes. You bow to your betters. You make your offerings. You teach your children to do the same. You hope they'll live a better life. You hope the gods are listening. Let's dive deeper into the home itself, because even your shelter, the insula, was a daily risk. You live in an upper floor. The rent is cheaper the higher you go, but the dangers climb too. No elevator, just narrow, uneven wooden stairs. Every trip up or down with your water jug or groceries feels like a gamble. The walls creak, the beams bow. There's a persistent draft, whether it's winter or summer. Rain seeps in through the roof. Mold grows in the corners. Rats scurry along the rafters. You sleep with your pouch of coins under your tunic, just in case your neighbor argues all night. Their baby cries louder than the street musicians. Below you, someone is boiling fish, and the stench creeps up through the floorboards. There are no locks, just hopes and weak hinges. Your furniture, sparse, a stool, a board on bricks, maybe a second-hand table from a market stall. Your bed, if you have one, is stuffed with straw, not feathers. The sheets are rough linen or woven scraps. No light bulbs, only oil lamps or candles, both fire hazards. You choose between darkness and danger every evening. But still, it's home. You decorate it with what little you can. A small image of Mercury or Fortuna. A string of garlic to ward off illness. Maybe a faded mosaic fragment from a demolished bathhouse. Your kitchen, if it exists, is a brazier in the corner. Illegal in most apartments because of the fire risk. But you cook anyway. You have to. The cost of eating out every day adds up, and the street food is questionable at best. So you roast chickpeas, simmer lentils, bake flatbread on hot tiles. The smoke fills the room. Your eyes water. You prop open a window with a broken amphora shard. Outside, the streets are chaos. There's no pavement, just uneven stones and ruts worn deep by cartwheels. Every gutter overflows with filth. Shopkeepers sweep refuse into the center of the street. Rain turns it into a soup of mud, dung, and rotting produce. Pedes, treants dodge carts, animals, and each other. If you're not careful, you'll get trampled. Or worse, splashed by a passing wheel, drenched in water that smells of everything but rain. Vendors shout constantly, "Fresh figs, hot sausages, oil for your lamp." Their calls blend into a never-ending din. Musicians play on corners, lyres, flutes, drums, sometimes skilled, often not. Beggars plead beside them, extending cracked hands and hollow eyes. You pass a funeral procession, Hired mourners wail theatrically. A body wrapped in linen is carried toward the gates of the city. The living return. The dead must be buried outside the walls. A senator's litter cuts through the crowd. His slaves push people aside. He doesn't look up from his scroll. His sandals never touch the street. Your eyes meet a soldier's. His armor is dented. His expression unreadable. His hand rests on the hilt of his gladius. You look away. At the market, you haggle for onions. The vendor spits on the scale. You argue. He shrugs. You walk away hungry. By the river, laundry women slap tunics on stones. The water is brown. The current swift. A boy slips and vanishes beneath the surface. No one dives in. The current is too strong. The river too unforgiving. And still, life goes on. You see a couple stealing kisses beneath an arch. A child chasing a hoop with a stick. A baker pulling loaves from a communal oven. A street actor performing a crude comedy. Laughter rises, even here. Because laughter is necessary. It is defiance, a shield, a breath of freedom in a city that rarely offers any. You return home at dusk. The sun sets behind the Capitoline Hill, painting the rooftops gold. You climb the stairs, each step a prayer. Dinner is a crust of bread, dipped in oil and sprinkled with salt. Maybe a date, if you're lucky. You chew slowly, savor every bite. You lie down, staring at the cracked ceiling. You hear footsteps above, murmurs next door, a dog barking far off. And in the distance, the roar of the Colosseum. Another life lost for entertainment. Another cheer echoing across the rooftops. You close your eyes and dream of quiet, of green fields, of cool water, of safety. But when morning comes, it's Rome again. The same stone, the same smoke, the same struggle. You rise, because you have no choice, because Rome demands it, and still, somehow, you endure. Let's talk identity, because who you were in Rome, your name, your status, your accent, your sandals, could determine your fate. There were citizens, full citizens, born to Roman parents, or sometimes granted the honor. They had rights, legal protections, voting privileges, access to the courts. If you were a male citizen, you could wear the toga, that uncomfortable woolen badge of status, hot and heavy in summer, but essential at official events. Then there were freedmen, former slaves who had been manumitted. They could not hold public office. Their children could. They often remained bound by loyalty or obligation to their former masters. Then foreigners, peregrini, traders, visitors, sometimes residents. They paid taxes. They worked, but they were not protected. If someone defrauded them or beat them in the street, they might have no recourse. And at the bottom, slaves, not people, in the eyes of the law, just property, tools that breathed and bled. Your name, your hopes, your family, none of it mattered. You were whatever your owner needed you to be. This hierarchy was reinforced constantly, through dress, through speech, through ceremony. The higher your status, the more elaborate your daily life. You were escorted by slaves. You carried seals and rings and scrolls. You dined reclining, were announced by name, and greeted with deference. If you were lowly, you stepped aside in the street. You waited in line at the baths. You made sure not to look too long or speak too boldly. Even your gods were stratified. The elite had private shrines, temple access, and personalized rituals. The poor prayed in crowds, outside gates, offering crumbs and whispered hopes. And yet, occasionally, the lines blurred. A successful freedman could become wealthy. A slave could save enough to buy freedom. A soldier might rise through the ranks and earn land. Rare, difficult, but not impossible. That hope, that glimmer, kept people moving forward. Rome celebrated its exceptionalness. Tories, a baker who became a magistrate. a slave who became a poet, a woman who founded a shrine. These were the exceptions, held up as proof that the system worked. They were also distractions, because for most, the story didn't change. Born poor, lived poor, died invisible. Let's visit a Roman villa. Not the crumbling apartment, but a countryside estate. This is where the elite escape the city's grime and noise. They walk in colonnaded gardens, surrounded by sculpted hedges and murmuring fountains. Their floors are mosaics, their ceilings painted with stars, their baths private, perfumed, heated by slaves who stoke fires day and night. Meals are feasts, course after course, oysters, dormice stuffed with nuts, honeyed wine, garum on everything. Conversation drifts from philosophy to gossip to business. They speak of Cicero, of stars, of Spain. Their children are tutored in Greek and rhetoric. Their wives manage vast households. Their dogs are pampered, their statues polished. This is the life imagined when people say, Rome. But it was not Rome for most. Back in the city, in the alleys behind the temples and under the shadows of marble columns, real Rome breathed. Vendors haggled, dogs barked, children ran barefoot through refuse. A man sharpened knives, a woman braided hair, a priest cast bones and muttered predictions. This is the Rome that built the empire, that bore the weight of its triumphs, that broke beneath its ambitions. And while emperors changed, while names like Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius echoed through palaces, it was these people who carried the days, the ones who cooked and cleaned and bled and built, the ones who buried the dead, the ones who watched stars and prayed for mercy. Now, let's step into the mind of someone truly at the margins. A gladiator in training. You wake to pain, always, muscles tight from yesterday's drills, bruises turning purple beneath your ribs. You sleep on a cot in a cell with a dozen others. Some snore, some whisper prayers. One stares blankly, mouthing a name he no longer says aloud. Your day begins with drills, sword work, dodging, strength, endurance. A mistake means a beating. A poor performance means punishment. You are not here to improve. You are here to entertain. Meals are heavy. Bread, beans, barley, fuel. Your body is the product. It must be strong. Some days, a trainer comes with news. You're fighting. Tomorrow, you size up your opponent. A Gaul, tall and quiet. You nod to each other. Maybe one of you dies. Maybe both. In the arena, the sun blinds you. The roar of the crowd fills your ears. You can't hear your own breath. Sand crunches beneath your sandals. You fight, not for glory, for survival, for a chance at another day, for the hope that if you fight well, they'll spare you. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Your blood joins the dust. And the crowd cheers. This is Rome. And what of entertainment beyond blood? Let's walk into a Roman theater. Not the Colosseum, but a semicircular open-air structure draped in linen sails for shade. You sit on stone benches, worn smooth by generations. The crowd murmurs, children fidget, vendors sell figs and watered wine. The play begins. Actors wear masks, one for comedy, another for tragedy. Their gestures are broad, their voices trained to carry. The plot is familiar. A clever slave, a pompous master, a love affair gone wrong. The audience laughs, gasps, heckles. It's not about surprise. It's about recognition, the stories you've grown up with. Myths, morals, mischief. Sometimes the play veers into politics. Thinly veiled criticism of a corrupt magistrate or a cruel policy. The crowd knows, the actors know, and if the wrong person hears, there may be consequences. But tonight, no soldiers interfere. Tonight, for a few hours, you forget your empty stomach. You forget the smells, the heat, the fear. You laugh until your cheeks hurt. Then you walk home and hope the night is quiet. Let's consider family now, not just blood, but the idea of household. The Roman familia included everyone under one roof: parents, children, slaves, and sometimes clients. The paterfamilias, the eldest male, held absolute authority over finances, over marriage, over life and death. He could disown a child, arrange or dissolve marriages, sell property, even punish or kill family members under certain conditions. Marriage was not a partnership of equals. It was strategic. Daughters were groomed for obedience and fertility, sons for duty and ambition. But family also meant responsibility, honor, reputation. If one member failed, all were shamed. If one succeeded, all rose. It was both a burden and a lifeline. Funerals were crucial to maintaining family honor. The dead were washed, anointed, dressed. Coins placed over their eyes or in their mouths for Karen. The body was displayed in the home, then paraded through the streets. Professional mourners wept loudly. Musicians played dirges. Masks of ancestors were worn by actors to remind all of lineage and legacy. Burial outside the city was law, cremation or interment, depending on the era. Tombs lined the roads leading out of Rome, so travelers would remember the names, remember the lives. Now, let's return to the Forum, the heart of public life. You stand among marble columns, beside bustling shops and crowded steps. Speeches echo. Laws are posted on bronze tablets. Philosophers debate. Traders haggle. Pickpockets work. It's chaos. It's life. You pass a moneylender's stall. Behind him, a man groans, beaten by his creditors. You avert your eyes. You approach the rostra, the speaker's platform. A man in a worn toga shouts about corruption. People listen. Some jeer. A patrol of lictors, armed attendants, watches from the shadows. This is the voice of the people, the illusion of power. Real decisions are made elsewhere, in chambers, in gardens, in whispers. Still, the Forum matters. It is where plebeians gather, where rumors spread, where revolts begin. Let's walk further, to the edge of the city, to the walls. Rome's gates never close fully. Trade doesn't sleep, nor does crime, nor do the poor who find no space inside and camp in the dust beyond the walls. You see them now, families in makeshift tents, men with vacant eyes, children too thin, women cooking scraps over open fires. They were once inside, like you. Then rent rose, or illness came, or work dried up. Now they linger, hoping for a day's wage, a coin, a miracle. You move past them. You don't look too long, because, this could be you. Easily. A bad harvest, a stolen purse, a moment of sickness. Rome doesn't catch you when you fall. It watches, it judges, then it moves on. But still, you live here. You belong. Somehow, you've learned the signs, the safe paths, the honest vendors, the kind guards. You've memorized the prayer for luck. You know which baths are least crowded. You know which alleys smell least foul. You know who to bribe, who to flatter, who to avoid. You are Roman, not by birth, maybe, not by status, but by survival. And in Rome, that's what matters most. Let's travel with a merchant now. Someone who lives on the road more than in any city. You wake before dawn in a roadside inn. The mattress is straw, the air thick with smoke and fleas. You pack your wares, dyed cloth, spices, free of oil. Everything carefully bundled to avoid theft, breakage, or customs inspection. You have your papers, proof of your right to trade. But bribes are faster than laws. A guard may stop you anyway. Ask questions. Search your cart. Take what he wants. You ride for days through the heat of Hispania, through the forests of Gaul, through the swamps of Illyria. You sleep in barns, in ditches, in stables. And when you reach your destination, you pay a market fee, a road tax, a bribe to the local official, and a portion to your guild. Only then can you sell. But trade is life. Rome thrives on it. Ships arrive at Ostia daily with grain from Egypt, amphorae of fish sauce from Lusitania, marble from Greece, glass from Syria, silk from far beyond, through Parthia, through traders who never speak your language but whose goods whisper power. Rome is not a city. It is a mouth, a gaping hunger fed by every corner of the known world. And that mouth never says enough. Let's imagine one more role. A priest. You wake to the sound of bells. Today is a feast day. You are responsible for the sacrifice. You've purified yourself, bathed, fasted, abstained. You dress in white, recite the rites, lead the animal to the altar. The crowd watches. You must speak perfectly. A single error, a stumble, a mispronunciation, and the ritual is void. You must begin again. The gods are precise. They do not tolerate sloppiness. You slit the throat. Blood spills into a bowl. The haruspex steps forward, inspecting the entrails. A good omen? The crowd exhales. If not, the tension lingers. A war may be lost. A marriage delayed. An election swayed. Religion is not comfort. It is duty, performance, a pact. Now let's fast forward to an aging Roman. Your back aches. Your eyes blur. Your steps slow. You've lived longer than most. You've seen emperors rise and fall. Fires blaze. Plagues take friends and rivals alike. You've watched temples built and razed, statues erected and defaced. You've heard Latin spoken in every accent, from Britain to Judea to Africa. You've buried children, buried wives, buried names. You walk the streets and see ghosts. A tavern that once belonged to your cousin. A forum where you first debated. A stairway where your son fell chasing a ball. You are Rome, not marble, but flesh, scarred, tired, alive. One day, soon, your ashes will be scattered, or your bones sealed in a niche, your name carved in Latin above the door. Maybe a friend will light incense. Maybe no one will remember. But for now, you walk, because Rome does not stop. And neither do you. So here we are. You've survived the hunger, the heat, the filth, the fear. You've waded through sewage, dodged fires, bribed guards, swallowed spoiled lentils, prayed to gods who don't answer, and watched death from a marble seat. You've fought, cried, endured. You've lasted a day in ancient Rome. Barely. Could you last a week? A month? A life? Unlikely. But for one night, you've traveled through stone alleys and smoky temples. You've tasted garum, felt the weight of a toga, heard the echo of sandals on marble, stood beneath arches built with blood. So close your eyes now. Let the dust settle. The torches dim. The crowds fade. You are not in an insula. You are not carrying water up 5 flights of stairs. You are not watching a thumb decide your fate. You are safe. You are still. And the empire? It sleeps. For now. Good night, traveler. May the gods of Rome let you rest in peace. You've earned it.